But for now, we're going to jump into our next keynote presentation on developer experience. Is that equals to customer experience? That's what we're going to be thinking about. A little bit about our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Our next speaker has held various roles in technical consulting of IT infrastructure for over 10 years and has helped many Fortune 500 companies on their journey to modernize technology, process, and culture. Please welcome Technical Products Lead, APJ Emerging Solutions, New Relic, Marcel Wysocki. Marcel, everybody. Enjoy.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, that's great. So thank you for the warm introduction. My name is Marcel Wysocki. I'm the Technical Products Lead here for APJ, and at New Relic, my focus is mainly around our emerging solutions. So everything that has to do with the cloud-native space, as well as everything that has to do with developer productivity. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about customer experience and developer experience. And I'm going to give you just a quick primer on both of these. So we're going to talk about what are they, right? Why are they important? How are they measured? How are they connected with each other? And then, last but not least, how to improve them. But before we get into that, let me just ask you a question. What percentage of the day does a developer actually spend writing code, which is what you pay them for, basically, right? Do you think it's 10%? Please raise your hand. OK, nobody says 10%. 30%, raise your hand. 30%. We got 1, 2, all right. 50%. That's a lot, a few more. 70%? OK, and 90%? Nobody. So I think most people said between 50 and 70%, right? Well, the actual number is a lot lower, unfortunately. It's 32%. That means developers spend 68% of their day doing other stuff that, essentially gets in the way of them writing code. So I just want you to keep that number in mind as we go through the presentation. But for now, let's talk a little bit about customer experience. We heard a little bit about customer experience from Sachin. I think that ties into this really neatly. But in a nutshell, especially in the digital world, when we talk about digital transformation, your digital customer experience is everything that customers will experience via the software that they're exposed to from your company. It's the virtual storefront of your business, it's the face of your business. I think you're all aware of this, right? And I think you're all aware of why customer experience is actually very important, right? So if you have a positive customer experience, it basically can build up brand advocacy, improve your reputation. It builds a foundation of loyalty and improves your customer retention. It can also impact sales and therefore your business growth. On the flip side, a bad customer experience could impact these in a negative way. So the way that we need to gain, or the way that we gain customers in this digital world is through an excellent customer experience, as well as beating our competitors, in time to market when we launch new products and services. Like I mentioned, there can also be negative impacts if we have a bad customer experience. There was a nice study or a survey done by Zendesk, and they found out that 50% of the customers will switch to a competitor after just one bad experience. If there's more than one bad experience, it's going to be 80%. So organizations can't really afford to deliver a poor customer experience nowadays. Downtime is very, very costly. A couple years back, Costco had an outage on their website. It's just a couple hours. It cost them $11 million. Especially in highly competitive markets, this is even more true. Let's assume you're trying to order pizza on one of these food delivery apps, and it doesn't work the first time. What are you going to do? Just switch to the next step, right? There's so many of them. So it's a lot easier to lose a customer than to actually gain one. So how can we improve customer experience? Actually, how do we measure customer experience? There are plenty of measures in the industry, and I'm sure you're all aware of these, right? We got the NPS, the CSAT. We can look at churn rate, retention rate, customer lifetime value, customer effort score, and so on and so on. But there are also technical metrics that we can look at through instrumenting our customer-facing services. For example, we can look at latency, failure rate, and if we actually go a bit deeper, we can look at things like in an e-commerce example, for example, shopping cart abandonment rate and other business oriented metrics through technical measurements. That's enough about customer experience. I think you're all pretty much aware of what customer experience is, why it's important. Let's talk a bit about developer experience. So developer experience really describes all the interactions and feelings that a developer has when they work on meeting a specific objective. You can think of it as the user experience for software programmers, right? But besides just source codes, this will touch a lot of different aspects of your organization in terms of technology, process, as well as culture. So while the customer experience that we talked about is based on what those product teams built, the developer experience is based on the tools and processes that the developer builds with. And just like the customer experience, the developer experience also has an impact. Because developer experience is actually a critical driver of business value. So it directly affects the quality and profitability of the products that you deliver, which means, it impacts your time to market, which means it impacts your competitiveness. But there are also some other important factors that a good or poor developer experience has an impact on. These are collaboration, motivation, overhead, the churn that you have in your organization, which in a time where we are looking at retaining talent and where that's really hard, it's actually a top priority for a lot of business leaders. But all of these basically impact your productivity. The more time a developer needs to spend figuring out tools and processes, the less time they actually have to write features and experiences for your customers. Therefore, innovation will grind to a halt. And we heard a bit about innovation earlier, right? Why is innovation so important? So there was a McKinsey study back in 2020 that was done across 440 large enterprises, where they basically looked at what is the developer velocity, which is a good proxy to looking at what is the developer experience in an organization. And the top quartile of organizations, they've outperformed their competitors in the bottom quartile by 4 to 5 times. They've had 60% higher total shareholder returns, 20% higher operating margins, and 55% more innovation came out of these companies. But these businesses also succeeded in other scoring. For example, they scored higher in terms of brand perception, customer satisfaction, as well as talent management. So by focusing on the developer experience, they were basically able to have their departments collaborate better, increase their productivity, decrease their time to market, increase motivation. People felt more connected to what they were doing, and they felt more connected to the end customer. A lot of overhead was eliminated as well. So how are those connected? It's actually really simple. I don't actually have to say this, right? Because developers are the people that build your digital customer experience. So the way, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the way to gain customers is through an excellent customer experience and time to market of new products and services, okay? But how can we do that? By making sure that developers can actually spend their time writing code and not doing other stuff. So you remember that number from earlier, 32%? This is actually, what it looks like. So this was came out of a survey conducted by the NewsStack. There are a lot of similar surveys out in the wild, and they all come up with similar results. So it's always about 30% of time that a developer, spends actually writing code. There's some minor differences in terms of seniority of the person or, geolocation, whatever. But overall, this is what it looks like. So you see a lot of time is spent in meetings, operational overheads, maintenance of old code, testing, security issues, and so on. This is often caused by a lot of tech debt and complexity. You got sprawling networks, distributed infrastructure, you got a lot of legacy apps maybe, or legacy software, legacy hardware. And on average, there was a UBS Evidence Lab report. They found out that just to perform a simple task, on average, a developer or even a DevOps team, they need to use 4 to 5 different tools for simple tasks. And juggling all of these multiple tools, of course, that creates some blind spots. Creates a lot of toil, and it makes it a lot harder to get your work done effectively. So The next question would be, how can we measure the developer experiences? So while there are many different possible subjective measures that we can look at, it's really hard to measure feeling. What does the developer feel? It's hard to measure motivation. It's hard to measure all of these. But we have some fairly technical metrics that we can take a look at. So the so-called 4 key metrics, they're often used as a proxy to measure developer experience. So I'm sure you've all heard of these before, right? We got the deployment frequency. How often do you release to production? What is your lead time for change? What is your change failure rate? The time to restore service or MTTR. But generally speaking, if you improve your developer experience, one or more than one of these will generally improve as well. In order to actually do that, improve the developer experience, we kind of have to know what do developers want, what do they need, what do they want. And just like we all have needs, I'm sure you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The same way developers have also needs, right? On the very low level, on a physiological level, they have needs in terms of choice of tools, of flexibility, automating tedious tasks, measuring success metrics, continuous improvement, and a more frictionless experience. Safety, they need a safe environment where you have a culture of experimentation, right? So they can actually drive value and innovation. They need creative freedom. They need to be able to learn from failure. A culture where failure isn't frowned upon. It's actually part of the learning process. Belonging, they want to have a sense of purpose. They want to have a sense of community that goes hand in hand with knowledge sharing within the organization, smooth onboarding experiences, documentation that is well written. Esteem, they want respect. They want to be respected in their decisions. They want that autonomy, and they work most well under a servant leadership style of leadership. And the self-actualization, that's where the important part happens. That's where the innovation happens, right? So if we can fulfill all of these basic needs, then that's where we want to get to, the innovation. But some of these needs may be different depending on your organization. Some of these may be different in different cultural contexts, right? But basically, a lot of them boil down to 3 things. The time that a developer needs to spend on other things rather than writing code and creating customer experiences. The freedom to experiment. The freedom to choose certain tools. They don't want to be dictated, oh, you have to use this IDE, you have to use these tools. And then the safety, to do that in a safe environment where they don't feel like the next time they fail at something, they're going to get canned. I have an example, actually, how we helped one of our customers. So this is a case study of a government department in New Zealand. Australia. They are a centralized hub for access to all government services, from birth certificates to digital driver's license, healthcare, and so on and so on. They had a lot of onboarding of new services, and that complexity was increasing. There was a really high demand for innovation and deliver services in a short time to market. They had some problems with that. There were a lot of issues around alerting and incidents and operational challenges where developers had to spend a lot of time figuring out what is wrong, what are the problems here. And just by focusing on a really, really small subset of this whole developer experience that we just talked about, they were actually able to decrease their time to market by 20%. They were able to achieve a 97% CSAT score, so their customer experience improved because they focused on the developer experience. Their time to resolution of incidents reduced, and the number of incidents also reduced, simply by focusing on a small subset. So if you think about it, if even a government can do that, focusing on a small subset, what can you do if you work in a more agile environment, in a more cloud-native organization, so to say? So what can you do? How can you improve your developer experience? A good developer experience is more than just, oh yeah, we got dev, we got ops, we provide some continuous delivery tools. That's not it, right? There's a lot more to that. So if you want to have an effective developer experience, maybe some of these steps will help you. I know as business leaders, you're often very busy. You're not necessarily spending much time with the developers, talking to them. So my recommendation is that's the first step. Listen, go to your developers, take an hour of your day, talk to them, right? Figure out what is their demand, right? What do your developers need and what do they want? Maybe try to create a user journey map, like what you would do with customer user journeys, right? And this will help you to take a more holistic view on your developer's journey and understand their path, their touch points, what are their influences, what are their fundamental constraints. The next step after we've done that, we got to measure. I think that's already mentioned twice right now. Measuring is so important, right? But to do that effectively, we got to identify feedback loops and try to shorten them as much as possible. Improve, the workflows, continuously measure the progress. Again, observability tools can really help with that. Measuring those 4 key metrics is a good start, but it won't really go as far as you probably want to go. Taking measurements from that were identified during that user journey mapping, where you got the pain points and the bottlenecks of the developers, that would be the next step. And that has to be done continuously, of course. Then innovate. Apply product thinking methods when you're looking at technical products and platforms that developers are using, right? We got to implement platforms that will help them get their job done instead of getting in their way to remove a lot of that friction that they have. So if we can get that 32% number up a little bit, like relative, that's a huge increase, even if it's just 10% more, right? That's 1/3 more productivity. So we got to invest in systems that enable developers to get their job done and help the developers themselves to improve the customer experience in the end. We got to create a culture where experimentation is the norm, right? Where developers are encouraged to experiment and innovate. And then last but not least, it's not enough to do this only once. We got to rinse and repeat, right? We got to focus on continuous improvement. If we only do this once, yeah, this will make for a nice showcase, but that's about it. But if we really want to impact change in our organization, then we have to do this continuously. We got to talk to them a lot. We got to figure out things on how can we collect feedback better, things like usability reviews or usability testing for tools that developers are using. I hope I was able to kind of articulate the importance of the developer experience to you and how it is essential also to your digital transformation journey. Thank you for your attention, and if you want to know more, you just come to our booth and we can talk about developer experience and how we can help you measure it and improve it. Thank you.